So I know there are a lot of questions, but here's what we know right now. The individual was a traveler who returned from South Africa on November the 22nd and tested positive on November the 29th. The individual is self-quarantining, and all close contacts have been contacted, and all close contacts thus far have tested negative. The individual was fully vaccinated and experienced mild symptoms, which are improving at this point. So this is the first confirmed case of COVID-19 caused by the Omicron variant detected in the United States. And as all of you know, because we've been discussing this, we knew that it was just a matter of time before the first case of Omicron would be detected in the United States. And as you know, we know, I've been saying it, and my colleagues on the medical team and others have been saying it, we know what we need to do to protect people. Get vaccinated if you're not already vaccinated. Get boosted if you've been vaccinated for more than 6 months with an mRNA or 2 months with J&J. And all the other things we've been talking about getting your children vaccinated, masking in indoor congregate settings, etc. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna call on people. Go ahead, Dick.
Thanks, Dr. Fauci. At this point, should Americans be changing anything they do in their day-to-day lives? Are you changing what you do? Is the president changing what he does?
No, that's a good question and an obvious question. But if you look at the things that we have been recommending, they're just the same. I mean, we want to keep doing that and make sure we pay close attention to that.
And are there other cases that the CDC is investigating as potential Omicron variants in the U.S. right now?
To my knowledge, at this point, no.
Eric, what should we take away from the fact that this person's symptoms appear to be mild at this point, and have all the other travelers on the plane also been contacted?
Well, this is what we call in medicine an N=1, which means that you really can't take anything away from a single patient. It is we feel good that this patient not only had mild symptoms, but actually the symptoms appear to be improving. But as we've said, there's a lot of information that is now evolving out of countries like South Africa that have a much larger number of individuals, not only who are confirmed, but individuals who are probables, which means they are going to have a lot of experience, which we will benefit from here as the weeks go by. Some of you have heard me say that in a matter of 2 weeks or 2.5, 3 weeks, we'll know a lot about transmissibility, about whether or not it essentially eludes some of the protection from things like monoclonal antibodies, whether or not the disease itself in general is going to be severe, and what is the difference in an individual who's been vaccinated versus unvaccinated, boosted versus not boosted. We're going to get that information. So again, I appreciate your question about one individual, but we're going to get a lot more information.
Caitlin.
Thanks, Dr. Fauci. 2 questions for you. One, you said this person had been fully vaccinated. Had they had a booster shot yet?
To my knowledge, no, Caitlin.
Okay. And under consideration, the CDC is considering having stricter testing requirements to get into the United States, a 24-hour window before taking off, but also is considering having a period of retesting once you get back to the United States. Would that have helped in this case if that was already in place?
You know, I'm not so sure, because this person, I mean, did what we hope other people would do. They got off, and as soon as they became symptomatic, they went and got tested, and it was positive.
And so when do you think those new requirements when it comes to travelers are actually going to be implemented, given clearly this is something that is already affecting the United States?
Well, that's obvious, all things that are being considered and under discussion, Caitlin. I don't think I can make any real statement about when and if that's going to happen.
Thank you. Dr. Fauci, in addition to any new testing requirements, what about new requirements for self-quarantining for travelers returning to the U.S., which in this case might have made a difference if he was quarantining for 7 to 14 days?
Right. You know, the recommendation is that the individual would self-quarantine if they are not vaccinated, and would also get tested within a period of 3 days. That's a recommendation right now.
And can you help us understand why the travel ban is effective right now for those particular 8 countries, especially when Omicron's been detected in other countries, including right here in the U.S.?
Well, if you go back and look at when we first found out about these cases that were emerging in South Africa, no one feels, I certainly don't, that a travel ban is going to prevent people who are infected from coming to the United States. But we needed to buy some time to be able to prepare, understand what's going on, What is the nature of this infection? What is the nature of the transmissibility? And we wanted to make sure that we didn't all of a sudden say, it's like anything else, don't worry about it, and then all of a sudden something unfolds in front of you that you're really not prepared for. So we look at this as a temporary measure.
Thank you. Dr. Fauci, do you support a vaccine requirement for domestic flights? The president was asked about this earlier this week and said that that had not yet been recommended to him. You're his chief medical advisor. Do you think that's something the country should adopt?
You know, I'm not so sure we should say that that would be a requirement. I would say what I've been saying all along, that we have 60 million people in this country who are not vaccinated, who are eligible to be vaccinated. Let's get them vaccinated. Let's get the people who are vaccinated boosted. Let's get the children vaccinated. That's where we want to go, as opposed to a requirement.
Wouldn't some people say that, you know, you have extinguished many of your options to, you know, get those people vaccinated, and this is one of the ways, as the OSHA mandate is held up in court, this would maybe be a way to push more people to get vaccinated?
You know, that's a possibility, but I think for the people who are listening to this, we again talk about why it's important to get vaccinated. I think what's happening now is another example of why it's important for people to get vaccinated who've not been vaccinated, but also boosting. Boosting is really very important because the data that we get on boosting, if you look at the level, for example, of an antibody, a neutralizing antibody, peak following the second dose of a 2-dose mRNA, it's like at this level. If you look at the peak following the third shot boost, it goes way up here. And people ask, why is that important? Because our experience with variants, such as the Delta variant, is that even though the vaccine isn't specifically targeted to the Delta variant, when you get a high enough level of an immune response, you get spillover protection even against a variant that the vaccine wasn't specifically directed at. And that's the reason why we feel, even though we don't have a lot of data on it, there's every reason to believe that that kind of increase that you get with the boost would be helpful, at least in preventing severe disease of a variant like Omicron.
Dr. Fauci, as you know, a lot of Americans right now are shopping for the best sort of booster or whatever they can get. And given the fact that manufacturers and scientists are racing to learn more about this variant and then to modify a vaccine that will more directly combat it right now, first, for those who already received their boost, how long would it be for them before conceivably they could have a new modified booster that would more directly target this? And is there any reason those individuals should wait, given the White House has said it'll be a couple of months perhaps before we have a more modified vaccine that more directly targets it?
Great question, because we get asked it a lot, and it's a relevant question. So right now, I would not be waiting. People say, well, if we're going to have a booster-specific vaccine, should we wait? If you are eligible, namely 6 months with a double mRNA dose or 2 months with the J&J, get boosted now. We may not need a variant-specific boost. We're preparing for the possibility that we need a variant-specific boost. And that's what the companies are doing. The administration has been in contact with the pharmaceutical companies to go ahead and take the steps in case we need it. But the mistake people would make is to say, let me wait and see if we get one. If you're eligible for boosting, get boosted right now.
Sabrina.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci. Follow up to Tyler's question, because there is screening in place for international travel, but we've seen how quickly variants can spread once they reach our shores. Does the science not suggest that there should at a minimum be a testing requirement for domestic air travel? And if not, why not?
Well, again, these kinds of things we always talk about and consider. But right now, I'm not so sure we need a testing for an air travel in this country. I always get back to the fact is that people should wind up getting vaccinated and boosted if they're eligible for a boost. I keep coming back to that because that's really the solution to this problem.
Jenny.
Two quick ones. Moderna executives have said in the past couple of days that this variant appears threatening and may demand new vaccines. What do you make of those remarks that seem a lot more alarmist than the administration's view or other vaccine makers?
Well, I know that we don't have enough information right now. As you know, and we've said this, that the profile of the molecular profile of the kinds of mutations that you see would suggest, A, that it might be more transmissible and that it might elude some of the protection of vaccines. But we don't know that now. We don't know what the constellation of mutations are actually going to be. We have to be prepared that there's going to be a diminution in protection, which is the reason why I keep getting back over and over again to say why it's so important to get boosted. But I think any declaration of what will or will not happen with this variant, it is too early to say. And I think we need to be careful because I know you're going to be reading a lot of tweets and a lot of comments about this. We're really very early in the process.
Say that this proves more transmissible but less virulent than Delta. Would there be any public health benefit to furthering its spread by lifting travel restrictions, for example, so it can outcompete the Delta variant?
You're talking about something really dangerous. You're talking about let a lot of people get infected to see if, in fact, you could protect them. That's something that I think almost all infectious disease people with any knowledge about infectious disease would not say that's a good idea.
Dr. Fauci, we are firmly in the holiday season, and a lot of Americans are wondering whether it's safe, even if they've been vaccinated, to go to a cocktail party without a mask, with a glass of eggnog in their hand. What's your advice to them? Well, the advice is what I follow myself and what I tell people to do, is that get vaccinated. I'm going to get to your question. I'm not eluding it. Get vaccinated, number one. If you're eligible for a boost, get boosted. And in a situation with the holiday season, indoor type settings with family that you know is vaccinated, people that you know, you could feel safe with not wearing a mask and having a dinner, having a reception. But when you are in a public congregate setting in which you do not know the status of the vaccination of the people involved, it is very prudent to wear a mask, and that's what I do.
Despite the eggnog?
Thank you.
Well, obviously, I mean, unless you have a special kind of mask that I don't know about, the fact is, sure, when you're eating and when you're drinking, take the mask down, but to the extent possible, keep it on when you're in an indoor congregate setting.
Dr. Fauci, as you advised the president about the possibility of new testing requirements for people coming into this country, does that include everybody?
The answer is yes, because you know that the new regulation, if you want to call it that, is that anybody and everybody who's coming into the country needs to get a test within 24 hours of getting on the plane to come here.
Well, what about people who don't take a plane and just these border crossers coming in huge numbers?
That's a different issue. For example, when you're talking, we still have Title 42 with regard to protection at the border. So there are protections at the border that you don't have the capability, as you know, of somebody getting on a plane, getting checked, looking at a passport. We don't have that there, but we can get some degree of mitigation.
Is there something to do to test these people somewhere else?
There is testing at the border under certain circumstances, as you know.
Michael.
Doctor, two questions. First, for folks in California, I know this is only one case, but what's your message to them should they be particularly concerned? And secondly, with your emphasis on boosters, why not make a determination that it's in the interest of public health for the definition of fully vaccinated to include that additional dose?
Okay, so for the people in California, we've been in contact with the public health officials in California. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to say, but I'm pretty sure they're going to say just do all of the mitigation, all of the things that we have been talking about up to now. For those who've not been doing that, start doing that. For those who have been, continue doing that.
And then in terms of making a determination that fully vaccinated?
Again, there's the official determination of what something is for a variety of reasons. For example, employment and getting vaccinated. What is the definition? That will stay that way. For optimal protection, I'm talking about what your personal effort to be optimally protected. That's why I say we should all get boosters.
Well, what about in terms of the mandate? Like, you have a vaccine mandate.
Right.
At what point does the booster become part of the mandate?
Yeah, I can't answer that right now, but I know that for the time being, the official definition of fully vaccinated is 2.
But do you see that changing? We keep having these variants. We're concerned about them.
It could change. It could change. It could change, yes.
Recommend it change?
Well, I don't know. Let's see what rolls out now. I mean, I know if I say it's going to change, it's going to get spread out. That's it. We don't know right now whether it should change, but it might.
Question on quarantining for international visitors. Do you think international visitors, when they arrive, they issue quarantine for 7 days, regardless of vaccination status?
Well, there are certain requirements for people who are, you're talking about foreign visitors?
Yes.
Yeah.
Going forward.
Obviously, if they are, they have to get tested within 24 hours. And when they come back, if they're not vaccinated, they have to be in quarantine. They're recommended for quarantine and recommended to get a test within 3 days.
If they are vaccinated,
Yes.
I'm sorry. If they are vaccinated, should they quarantine?
Well, again, we're going to get confused here. You're talking about United States citizens, or you're talking about anybody that comes into the country from anywhere. I'm not sure what that's going to be. I think we'll have to just check with the CDC.
Karen.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen. Dr. Fauci, there are reports that in a new book, former President Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, says that the then president, tested positive for COVID 3 days before the debate with President Biden. Were you aware of that positive test at the time? And do you think, given what Meadows says, that he put then candidate Biden at risk at that debate?
Well, I certainly was not aware of his test positivity or negativity.
Do you think he put President Biden?
I'm not going to specifically talk about who put who at risk, but I would say, as I've said, not only for an individual, but for everybody, that if you test positive, you should be quarantining yourself.
Dr. Fauci, just to follow on that quickly, if I may. President Trump's doctor, who you worked with at the time, Dr. Sean Conley, was aware of that, according to Mark Meadows, who you also worked with during that time. And yet, former President Trump continued to go out in public events. Based on your medical advice, is that something that you would have recommended if he had tested positive?
Well, I would recommend to anyone, whether it's the president or any of my patients or any of the people that I deal with, that if you test positive, you should be prudent and quarantine yourself.
Christian.
Dr. Fauci.
Christian.
Dr. Fauci, with all due respect, there's 0 case of COVID, of Omicron case in Zimbabwe, in Namibia, in Lesotho, in Mozambique. What justify imposing a travel ban on countries that have 0 case of the Omicron variant?
You know, that's a very good question, an important question, and we did struggle with that, but we wanted to see if we could bide time temporarily. So I do hope that this gets sorted out and lifted before it has any significant impact on your country.
Go ahead. I think we have to keep going so we can get more people.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci.
Go ahead.
Last week, the governor of New York signed an executive order to postpone elective hospital surgeries to prepare for the Omicron variant. I know that you and your team are being proactive as we try to learn more about this, but do you believe that some states might be going too far too quickly before we know too much?
You know, I really don't want to comment on the situation in individual states because there are so many factors from state to state that are different. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to comment whether a state should or should not postpone elective surgeries.
And then the president said that we will defeat this variant of the coronavirus, not with lockdowns or shutdowns, but based off of, the tools that we have now. Is there anything that we are, taking into this new variant experience based off of some of the adverse effects of some of those lockdowns? I mean, we just passed, I think, 100,000 overdose deaths for the first time ever.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we always discuss things that we might do to better our preparation, better our response. That's something we discuss every single day. But right now, what I've always said, and I'll continue to say, let's utilize and implement the tools that we have, because if we had done that, if we had the overwhelming majority of people in this country vaccinated and those who needed to be boosted, our vulnerability would be much less than it is right now.
Brian, last one, then I gotta let him go.
Dr. Fauci, what do you see as an end game? In the 1918 flu pandemic, it eventually evolved till it was less lethal. But there are those who are saying that we're never going to get that far with this virus because we need more people vaccinated. What do you see as the end game?
I mean, the end game, which we hope and I think will occur, is that as we get more people vaccinated, not only in this country, but globally, we will see a situation where viruses will not have the opportunity, what they have right now, is to essentially freely distribute and freely circulate in society, both domestic society and global society. The more protection you get with vaccines, the less likelihood a virus has to do that, the less likelihood a virus has to mutate, the less likely you're going to get a variant. So one of the things that we need to do about our long end game is to do the things we've been saying every single day, not only for ourselves, but internationally. And we have done a lot and will continue to do a lot to get low and middle income countries vaccinated. Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt that this will end. I promise you that. This will end.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci.